The materials to make this project are
a box cutter, cardboard,
a 10-pack of small magnets,
flexible spackle, a putty knife,
masking tape,
scissors, a hot glue gun, a pen or pencil, some strong velcro, a pack of the smallest LED keychains you can find, preferably 4 or more, parchment paper, this will act as a diffuser for the LEDs, some thin plastic, some thin paper, I used a piece of binder paper, gray primer, metallic gold spray paint, metallic silver spray paint, gloss continental red spray paint,
some good reference images, and my templates, which are free to download in the description, so I recommend that you give that a try. For making the faceplate, I took my 4 faceplate templates and I just glued them together along the seams, and I just made sure to bend it everywhere to where it would look nice once you put all the pieces together. And as you glue, make sure that your pieces line up with the other ones. Then, for the frame that goes around the faceplate, I took all of those pattern pieces and I just glued them together, and for tracing them out, some of the pieces need to be mirrored and the other ones just need to be traced out twice. And as you glue, make sure that the edge lines up with the edge of the faceplate so you don't end up with any ugly gaps. Then I put the faceplate on top of the frame, and if there were any gaps, I would just fill them in with more cardboard, and if there was too much cardboard, I'd just trim a little bit off. Now for the back panel of the helmet, I mirrored the middle template piece, and then I just stuck all those tiny little flaps together to get it to be a nice compound curve. And then I added the side piece, and I was making sure that it would just line up with the other edge of the frame, and if it wasn't, then I just trim it a little bit. And the reason why the back plate and the front frame are in different pieces is so you can get your head in there. If you just wanted it to be a display piece, then you could make it all one piece. So here I cut a bit too much off so I couldn't get my head in, so I just added another thin layer around the edge. And then on the front, there's a bit of gap behind the top front panels of the faceplate, so I just filled that in with more cardboard.
Alright, so now we have all of the pieces of the helmet made, and I also went ahead and glued in some magnets to hold the faceplate down. So now we are ready to fill with the flexible spackle, and then wait for that to dry, and then paint the helmet.
When filling the helmet, my first instinct with the flexible spackle was to use my fingers because it was really easy just to get them in all those small gaps, but then later on I realized that a putty knife would be a much better solution, so I ended up using that just to cover the whole thing and fill up those corrugation lines in the cardboard. And a very handy step in filling is once you've filled the piece, use a bit of warm water just to smoothen it out, because that'll save you a lot of time in sanding when it's a lot smoother rather than it being very jagged and rough. So the basic steps for this is just filling, sanding, and priming multiple times until you're happy with the outcome. When I sanded this helmet, to get all the high spots off, I started with a 70 grit sandpaper, and then I moved up to 100 grit just to smoothen it out, and then I finished with a 220 grit to make it nice and smooth. So I sanded, filled, and primed about 3 times, so something that I found that was really handy and made the sanding process go a lot faster is just to get a tiny little square of cardboard and then bend the sandpaper around that to get a much easier to use tool. And before you prime, you want to make sure to use a tack cloth or a air compressor to knock off all the extra dust. So the point of priming is to expose all those low spots so you can see them and then fill them in on your second round. This is what my helmet was looking like after I had sanded and filled 3 times. After I had finished filling, sanding, and priming, I need to add all the panel lines on the back of the helmet and the front frame. So to do that, I would just use my X-Acto knife and just cut just deep enough to where it would barely scratch.
Alright, so now I've got all the silver details on the sides and the gold jaw plate on the front done. So now we're going to go paint this gold and these silver right now, as well as the faceplate. And then we'll do some masking and then paint the rest of it red.
The best way I found to use metallic paint is to do very thin coats and then build them up very slowly until you get a nice smooth finish, rather than doing it with one heavy coat and then risking getting drips all over your project. And I like to use spray paint over oil paints because it's just so much easier, and also you don't get any of those brush marks. And to make sure that you don't get any overspray on the front frame from the gold where the silver should be, I just covered it with some paper, but you could easily do the same thing with some masking tape. I just chose paper because it was faster. I used about 3 coats to build up the shiny effect.
Alright, so now I have masked off where all the gold and silver is going to stay. So now the rest of the piece is going to be red. So I'm going to go paint that now.
The same rules apply with this red gloss paint as it does with the metallic paints. So you're going to do some very thin coats and then just build it up little by little until you get a nice effect. I also painted a thin sheet of cardboard silver just to add into those little cheek panels. For the eyes, I'm going to be using some very small LEDs, so I thought to disperse that light evenly, I should use a layer of plastic and then some baking paper or parchment paper. And what I found out is that baking paper does not stick to hot glue, so what I did is I placed down the piece of plastic and then the parchment paper on top of that, and then I wrapped some electrical tape around the edges just to hold it down. And when I was adding that piece, I made sure to leave a little gap in between that and the top so I could look out of it. So for connecting the front half and the back half together, I used some Velcro just because that's what I had on hand, but something that would work just as well is elastic or maybe magnets or something in that field. The Velcro I was using had an adhesive backing, but from past experiences, I know that that isn't that strong, so I would just apply some hot glue onto the adhesive and then stick the 2 pieces together, making a much stronger bond than if it was just adhesive. If you spent more time in the construction phase, you could get a smoother gap. Alright, I have now just finished attaching the back with some Velcro, so now all we need to do is do the same plastic and parchment paper layer on these backlights, and then we'll figure out how to light them up. So I found these little LED keychains on Amazon and they work great. When I was filming this, the camera couldn't really pick it up, but the light was just really bright, so I needed to tone it down a little. So what I did was I covered the tip of the LED with a little bit of paper. So now I have covered the tip of the LED with some thin paper just to tone down the brightness a bit, and then I glued it in to the eye. So now when you turn it on, it lights up nicely. So now let's go do that to the other eye. Alright, so now we have both of the LEDs put in on the helmet. So now when the eyes light up nicely, So what I'm going to do is, when I'm wearing the helmet, I don't want to be staring into these LED lights when I'm trying to see through these little slits here. So what I'm going to do is just cover up the back with a little bit of electrical tape. Alright, so now the backs of these lights are covered up, so you're not as blinded when you're looking in it. But now I'm going to take the remaining LED lights and I'm just going to stick them in little spots back here. And when I was building this, I just couldn't deal with the keychains, so I went and found some wire cutters and I used those to snip the keychains off, and that worked surprisingly well. A really easy way to figure out where to position the light is to hold it up to a spot where you think it'll work and then turn it on, and if the light disperses, great, then glue it on there. Alright, so now I have finished all the lights. So, let me just go ahead and turn those on. So now, that is what the lights look like on the helmet. So we got both lights on the back, and then the lights on the eyes.
Alright, so that is the finished helmet. So now let's go to the outro.
This was a very fun project to work on because some of the tools I used in this I have never used before, so I highly recommend that you give it a try. And if you liked the video, a subscribe would really help me out. This video was made by RJR Productions, and this is my Iron Man Mark 85 helmet with a removable faceplate. This has been RJR Productions, signing off. Till next time.